Shalom. So I thought maybe I needed to kind of put all of my disclaimers in one place. So I decided to do that and um, just have this be a general disclaimer for the channel. Um, and this partially came out of talking to several rabbis and having many discussions over the last couple of weeks where, in fact, a few people gave me some constructive criticism, which I'm going to try to take to heart. So first and foremost, I'm talking to a lot of people. I'm talking to a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds, and I don't preface every sentence with "my opinion is" and "I think." And obviously, I know that which I know, and that which I do know is less than what hopefully I will know. And at age 45, what I believe now um, is hopefully a lot more accurate and wise than what I believed when I was at 35 and 25, and certainly at 15 and 5. And so at 55, I hope to be much wiser than I am now. And when I say anything, I realize that I may, in fact, be wrong about some portion of that. That is not in any way indicative that I should go around and not believe that I do know some of the things. And this goes back to the eternal evolution is a theory uh, debate where people will say evolution is a theory and science has theories. And yes, evolution is a theory, but it's a theory that has a lot of evidence behind it. And that means we don't just dismiss it and we don't just pretend that it doesn't exist because it is a theory. And so, yes, all of the things I say is just my opinion, man. But my opinion is my considered opinion, and my considered opinion is much more informed and learned than lots of other people's less considered opinions. And so I do hope to learn and improve, and I will inevitably make mistakes. Um, that in no way means that I should pretend I know less than I do. And if you want to debate with me about halacha, for example, and you don't know what Igrot Moshe and Yabia Omer are, maybe you shouldn't be telling me, trying to tell me what halacha is like or isn't like. Um, at the same time, I am not a posek, and anybody who understands Judaism knows that there are people who have the authority to speak on behalf of Judaism. That's not me. I uh, do know the opinions of many people, and I certainly try never to speak out of turn with what is generally accepted within the framework of Orthodox Judaism and what we call the 4 cubits of halacha. But I'm obviously no rabbi, I'm obviously no great sage, and that is in fact the reason why I can have my channel and I can have the discussions that I have, and I can try to speak to the number of people that I do. um, within that, it's important to realize that, for example, when I talk with Chezi, who obviously does know how to look something up in Yabia Omer or Vayeshev Hayam or any of the other poskim, um, that what I say to him has a different cadence and a different level of respect and a different meaning than what I say to somebody who wouldn't know the first thing about Judaism or Christianity or any other thing that we may be discussing here. Um, and so, unfortunately, anytime you speak to more than one person, your how you say things and how you are able to make yourself understood to them is complicated by the fact that um, the language you speak, the words you speak, the way you speak, their presuppositions, their assumptions, and when you don't say something clearly. And really, I mean, this is the biggest part of this disclaimer has to come down to the point of the Trinity. Um, Unfortunately, it is possible to listen to some of my videos, some of my discussions, and think that I have less than a complete condemnation for the Trinity. And I would never want that to be misunderstood by anyone. Um, for thousands of years, millions, billions of people understand the Trinity in ways that are clearly heretical within Christianity. I hope that's clear that the vast majority of Christians, for the vast majority of Christian history and today, understand the Trinity in ways that are clearly idolatrous within Christianity. I don't think anybody who is actually aware of the doctrines of the Trinity can in any way deny that the vast majority of Christians believe things which are clearly heretical to Christianity because of the doctrine of the Trinity. The Trinity has for 2,000 years been a source of incredible heartache, cruelty, murder, all sorts of heresy. And the East-West schism is just one of the examples, whether it's Arianism or from the very first day that Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, um, punched or slapped Arius at Nicaea. The Trinity has been a cause of discord, and it is um, a manifestation of the satanic in religion. And I have to say all of that just to clarify my position, because then at the same time, I will talk about the monarchical Trinity with people who understand the Trinity in ways that the vast majority of people do not. And I will say, and I do believe, that in fact, the monarchical Trinity, as understood by people who truly understand it, has a certain capacity to be less mistaken than, for example, the type of monism that Islam has taught to billions of people, and which is far less problematic because the Bible fundamentally teaches that there is one God. And the fact that the vast majority of people have no capacity to truly um, investigate theologically and philosophically what that means for there to be one God does not negate the simple understanding which all of us should have, which is fundamental and reiterated on nearly every single page of the Bible, starting from Genesis all the way to the end, including the Christian Bible, I have to say, which is that there is one God and there is only one God. And so for thousands of years, it has not been necessary to say more than simply that the Trinity is a mistake. There is plenty of reason for people to, in fact, be conversant in the particular mistakes that are inherent to understandings of the Trinity, because we are reaching a time when those differences matter. And one example I often give is on a particular Facebook group where there were many rabbis. There was a Noahide who asked a question, and because of the polemical nature of how most rabbis address the Trinity, there was a Noahide who had a practical question which needed to be asked of a rabbi. And frankly, if any rabbi had told him X as opposed to Y, I would have been shocked. Yet, because of the polemical nature of the discussion that we've been having for a very long time, and for anyone who actually cares, I would say, please, the obvious Tosfot regarding, which is brought la halacha all over the place, regarding whether Christianity is shituf or it is avodah zarah. And I would also recommend anyone interested to look at Sefer Arachim Chabad under Umot HaOlam, where he goes at great length about certain mystical concepts which have to do with whether shituf is lechatchila for some people, the way that they can be, they can connect to Elokut or not. It is no longer possible for people to have discussions. We live in a time of Farhesia. We live in a time where that discussion which I have with anyone is a discussion which, in effect, because of that recording device which we are all carrying at all times, we are speaking to everyone all at once. And so when somebody has a serious question regarding shituf versus avodah zarah, whereas depending on the capacity of each individual person to understand the conceptual distinctions between shituf or avodah zarah, it was possible to say, it's all avodah zarah, just leave it alone. And that is not something that is practical anymore. Especially when we have growing numbers of Noahides whose parents, whose children, whose spouses, whose family, friends, neighbors, everyone they know are Christians. A simple condemnation and equating of Christianity with avodah zarah, that is not an answer that Judaism can continue to give indiscriminately to everyone. And so when I do speak to somebody who understands the concept of the monarchical Trinity in a way that is far more complex and understands the philosophical question of the one and the many, it becomes necessary to be able to have a conversation where I understand the difference between the monarchical trinity and Muslim monism to pure idolatry and polytheism, and which, frankly, the vast majority of Christians, and again, ask any Christian theologian, the vast majority of Christians believe in a Trinity which is heretical to Christianity. So we're not talking about a monarchical Trinity for the vast majority of Christians. That is not what the vast majority of Christians believe. And that is the problem. And so when I blanket, if the question is a Boolean yes or no on the Trinity is obviously wrong. That doesn't mean that in actual nuanced conversation, I don't understand when people are talking about hypostases and essence and emanation, what they are talking about. And we are at a time when it becomes necessary for us to be able to speak to people who wish to speak with that level of nuance, in that level of nuance with that person. And unfortunately, it's no longer a point where what we say to one person is not something that is said to many people. And when it comes down to a question of B'nai Noach, which there are increasing numbers of, it becomes vital that the discussion be nuanced and not simply polemical. So that's the Trinity. Second thing to speak about, Zionism. Political Zionism is a political movement, and politics do not belong in Jewish theology. They do not belong in any theology. And the political movement of Zionism is something which tries to affiliate itself with Jewish theology, which is also referred to as Zionism, which is the idea of the ingathering of the exiles and the fact that the land of Israel was given by God to the people of Israel. My condemnation of political Zionism is in no way a negation of fundamental Jewish beliefs in the eternal nature of the holiness of the land of Israel. And that distinction has to be made clear, because the vast majority of people who attack Zionism today are in fact using that as a smokescreen to attack Jews, sometimes Judaism, and the conflation of Zionism with Judaism and Jews is itself problematic, and I have made way too many videos about this already. Judaism. Reform, conservative, reconstructionist, these are not forms of Judaism. They call themselves Judaism. They are religions which, until very recently, were practiced by many Jews. Judaism is defined clearly by the 13 principles of faith of Maimonides, which has become universally accepted in Jewish communities through the acceptance of the piyut of the hymn Yigdal, which expresses these 13 principles clearly, and the singing of this hymn in all Jewish communities, Rubam Kekulam, pretty much without exception, has in fact made it incumbent on Klal Israel. The people of Israel are the people who have survived throughout the centuries as Or Legola, as a light onto the nations. And the visible nature of the people of Israel, the identification of the people of Israel, throughout history is clear. There are no secret groups which will pop up and claim the mantle of being Israel, because the job of Israel throughout history has been, in fact, to proclaim our relationship with God as a mamlechet kohanim, as a priestly nation to the entire world. And so the visible status of the Klal Israel, of the people of Israel, throughout history is inherent to our being. And any community which lacks the Mesorah, lacks the tradition, lacks those otiot, those signs which God has promised, will mark Israel as Israel. And I have to say, circumcision, phylacteries, and the Sabbath are designated in the Bible itself as 3 marks of Israel, and we are the only people who have in fact kept phylacteries and circumcision and the Sabbath on the 7th day throughout history. And these are signs which the Bible itself proclaims as symbols of ot hi beini ubeinechem, that it is a sign between you and between me, that of who Israel is. And even more astonishingly, I always wondered why HaChodesh Hazel Lachem, this month is for you, Rosh Chadashim, was such an important part of halacha, of Jewish law, until recently. The discussions over the calendar have proven so clearly who is Israel and who is not. This month is for you, for Israel, the first of the months, and the Quran, with its explicit prohibition of intercalation of months, proves to anyone who has eyes to see that the calendar of Islam is in fact completely deficient. And anyone who is paying attention to the Easter debates and really looks at Nicaea and what was said at Nicaea sees how Christianity in its entirety turned its back on Torah and the calendar and what it means to be Israel. And so when it comes down to it, yes, we are Israel, we are Mamlechet Kohanim, and that has been definitively established through Maimonides and the 13 Principles of Faith, and through the Shulchan Aruch of the Beit Yosef, with the commentaries of the Ashkenazi rabbis, including Rav Moshe Isserlis, and the institution of the Kabbalah of the Arizal. These are things which the entirety of Israel has, in fact, accepted as binding, and anyone who walks away from Israel is walking away from Israel. And throughout history of the world, many people, in a very real sense, a majority of Jews in each generation have in fact walked away from, and DNA is proving this even more, from what it means to be Israel. And God has maintained the remnant of Israel throughout history in a way that in our days has become visible in miraculous ways. And so when I speak of Judaism, when I speak of Israel, when I speak of Torah, it is clearly Orthodox Judaism as defined by that which has been accepted by the entirety of Israel, even though there are people who, over the past 200 years, have obviously fallen away from it. As far as Bnei Noach, I think it is important for us to recognize that, in fact, there are people whose religion is Judaism. Chezi, if you want to jump on, we can continue this discussion. But first, please allow me to go through my disclaimers, and then we'll talk more. Because I'm sure these are things people will have arguments about. It is necessary for us as Jews to recognize that there are people whose religion is Judaism. And thanks to Chezi, I have to say that the Talmud in the Megillah says quite clearly that any Gentile who's kofer be'avodah zarah, who denies avodah zarah, is in fact called a Yehudi, is called a Jew. And so there are in the world today tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of Jews who are, in halachic terms, Bnei Noach. They are not Kohen, Levi, or Israel. They are in fact Bnei Umot HaOlam. The Rebbe particularly liked the term Leumim. But in any case, it has become necessary for us to take halachic cognizance of these people, which many rabbinic courts have started to do. And frankly, it's way past time. And I think it's something that needs Yirei Hashem. Okay, I'm not sure that's very clear. Although, yes, that is the biblical term for it. So there needs to be a halachic home, and hopefully this channel is in fact providing a halachic home for those Jews who are not part of Israel, the Bnei Noach. At the same time, it is clearly against our religion to proselytize. I am not evangelizing. I am not proselytizing. And in fact, I was just reading the article from Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz which he wrote. Do I have it? Peace Without Conciliation, the Irrelevance of Toleration in Judaism. And as one of the great poskim of the generation, he wrote this back in 2005. It was printed in by Duke University Press in Common Knowledge. Volume 11, Issue 1, Winter 2005, pages 41 through 47. It's available on my Discord server if anybody is interested. We have a responsibility as Jews to be available to those people who have questions about, who have serious and honest questions about Judaism, because they are asking serious and honest questions about God. And this is our responsibility, not to even trespass on the religion of others, not to have toleration, not to have interfaith dialogue. I don't believe in interfaith dialogue. I do not speak to Christians because I believe that they have Torah to teach me. I have discussions with my neighbors. I have discussions with people who have become my friends because they would like to discuss things with me, because chokhmah begoyim ta'amin, because they have wisdom that the Torah tells me I should in fact avail of myself of. And when I refer to 1 Corinthians 12, in that there is a difference, and I was just talking to a rabbi about this recently, Hakol kol Yaakov v'hayadayim yedei Esav. It is necessary for us as Jews to recognize the reason that God created a diversity of nations, b'tifarto, and the beauty of that. And in fact, we need to move past what has been our justified reaction for thousands of years of famously, it is said in the Haredi world, if the Jews do not make kiddush, the goyim will make havdalah. And that has been true. And in fact, we must make kiddush, or there will in fact be havdalah. And that is not in any way, I would never, ever, and you can watch some of my videos where I had to explain this painfully. There is a difference between Jew and Gentile. There is a difference between Jew and Gentile. And I don't think it's some sort of happenstance that precisely that which Paul said, which is understood has been understood in a certain way, Paul of Tarsus has been understood in a certain way throughout Christian history, which is that there is no Jew or Greek, no male or female, no slave or free in Christ Jesus. The general understanding of that has in fact been that there is no difference. And if that is your understanding, then you are falling into the most obvious and crazy mistake that is being made in our society today, which is not being able to tell the difference between a man and a woman. And I don't think it's simply happenstance that interpretation of that verse is exactly what is causing upheaval, because I believe that there is a spiritual reality to the mistake within that understanding. there is a difference between Jew and Greek. That is something that I am in no way in doubt about. That doesn't mean that I don't love people like Richard and Andrew and Michael and Sterling, and those are all the people who have commented so far. But there is a categorical difference between them and Israel, which is simply undeniable to someone who has eyes to see and looks at the history of humanity and wants to, in fact, be Mikabel ol Malchus Shemayim, who wants to accept the yoke of heaven. And it is actually quite funny that I would have to say this to Christians, because in fact, the Christian Bible spells this out far more clearly than I think most Jews are ready and willing to spell it out. And funny enough, so does the Quran. Okay, I think those are all my disclaimers. So if people actually want to jump on, only people I like, and discuss any of these disclaimers in greater nuance and depth, we can. Otherwise, I'll probably go to bed and go so I can do my homework tomorrow. Richard is always keeping me from doing my homework. Richard and Andrew, they're bad influence on my school, on my schoolwork. So we'll see if anybody jumps on. Several places, but I would say most clearly where Jesus says to his disciples not to go to the city of the Gentiles. I think in several places in Matthew, there is an obvious distinction made by Jesus in the Gospels between Jew and Gentile. And then when you look even in Romans, that becomes pretty clear. And Chazi is speaking in tongues. Kabel et ha'emet mipi omro. Yes, even if Paul of Tarsus speaks some truth, I have to say that even Satan is able to speak the truth sometimes. What does James say? Even the demons believe in God. Okay, people, if somebody's going to join your, I'm not going to sit here reading comments. I might just go to bed. Okay, so Rabbi Chazi is telling me to go to sleep. I am going to go to bed. Good night, people.